Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. It's day 25, October 13th, and I have a two-parter for you. Today is essentially the role of the fourth estate into democracy. So this is a little bit of background, reminder, civics, all the stuff you might have forgotten, or maybe you didn't learn. I'm not sure. But today will be about the role of the fourth estate in our democracy. And tomorrow's show will be about how it's been twisted around, perverted, broken, exploited, all the things you would expect that happens in America. Which sounds like I'm negative, but I'm not. It's just we seem to change faster than we keep up cognitively with the changes. So uh welcome to the rate of change. That's one of the things that I've watched in my lifetime that I cannot believe how fast it's happened and what it's done because we change faster than we adjust our policies and our brains to adjust for the change. Okay, so the fourth estate is the press or the news media, which plays an essential role in our democratic society. It functions as a watchdog that holds government and powerful entities accountable. I secretly always wanted to be a journalist. I was a journalist in high school. I did an expose on hazing in the boys' club. There was a big scene with hazing, and then I also wrote an article about when Nick got stabbed by idiot. I don't know. There was stabbing at our school, and Nick was on leadership, and I wrote about what happened there, and then did the big expose. It started with the stabbing. That's probably important. I buried the lead. The lead is something we talk about in journalism. You put the lead at the top. That's the most exciting part. Okay, come back. Exposing injustices, corruption, and power abuses serve as a critical check. It reinforces transparency and upholds the rule of law. So by having somebody that reports on what's happening, it helps us keep things in check. In fact, a lot of the stuff that's happened in the last 10 years, we wouldn't even know about if reporters weren't digging and digging and digging. Because one thing Trump's really good at is creating chaos, almost more stories than a person can chase, more stories than a country can chase. Look, stupid idiots like me, people like us are doing news because there's too much. I try to do it with a different point of view, but we're all doing some kind of reporting because there's just been so much to report about. Okay, so let's dive into why it's called the Fourth Estate. It began all the way back in the 18th century, which we know is the 1700s, right? If it's 18th century, it's the number before for the 100. Who did that? It was just such a bad decision. Anyway, it's like naming a product Monday. What a bad name for a product. The term fourth estate dates back to the 18th century and originally referred to the press's unofficial role in governance, separate from the three recognized powers. At that time, in the 1700s, the three powers were the clergy, nobility, and commoners. Now, this isn't before we get really all the way to the US yet. This is how how journalism kind of starting back in the day. Remember, we're founded in 1776, so this is actually before that. So let me help you understand. In the United States, so in England, it was the clergy, Church of England, I believe it is, nobility, the wealthy, and commoners, the rest of us. In the US, it became when we became the United States, the executive, meaning the president, the legislative, that's Congress, and the judicial branches, that's SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, and everybody else in the judicial branches. The phrase underscores the press's power to shape public opinion and influence policy, a role crucial for informing citizenry and democratic oversight. So the fourth estate, it was the fourth thing that could keep an eye on how a government might work. So we go from England to the United States, but this is important because I'm going to take you all the way back to before we're a country. All right, we're here, but we're before we're a country. So media is really democracy's mirror. It's a way for us to see ourselves and make sure our country is running properly, right? Because they're finding out the dark underbelly. It informs citizens, it questions authority, much like me. It ensures transparency. In a functioning democracy, the press exposes corruption, sheds light on policy impacts. Remember the thinking it through part? That's something the press does. And empowers citizens to make informed decisions. The media operates freely when it does operate freely. It's not right now. I hate to tell you that, but when it's operating freely, meaning to its own purpose, I mean, in search of truth, which would be essentially what the media's ultimate goal would be, to find the truth, to get to the true facts. When it can operate like that, unencumbered, it protects democracy. When it doesn't, it can be manipulated. And that's what we'll talk about. almost more tomorrow. Today we'll talk about some of the golden days of the Fourth Estate and some of the real amazing good that it did. And that's what I wanted to do, is go back and explain how the Fourth Estate used to really function, because Trump has done such a job of making people be suspect of the news, and the media has not helped themselves. I am not blaming one person on this. This has been systemic. It's come from corporate overlords. It's come from how the media has changed. So we're going to talk about that. But here's some of the golden days of the Fourth Estate. In 1735, there was a trial of John Peter Zenger. This was a critical moment for press freedom because Zenger was a New York printer. All right, he was a printing press guy. And he was arrested for publishing criticisms of the colonial governor. Now, we're not the United States yet. We're still colonies, right? So he was arrested for publishing criticisms of the colonial governor, William Cosby. That's funny because his name's really Bill Cosby, but I didn't even pick up on that till right now, until I said it out loud. Anyway, William Cosby accused the printer of corruption and authoritarian practices. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. The printer was accusing Bill Cosby of corruption and authoritarian practices. I'm going to now start cracking myself up. How did I not see this Bill Cosby earlier? At the time, criticizing the government was considered libel, regardless of the truth. Can you imagine? In the colonies, you couldn't speak out about the government. That was considered a crime, even if you were telling the truth. The jury, though, let's see. So at the time of criticizing the government, Zenger's lawyer, Andrew Hamilton, argued the truth should be a defense against libel. It should be. In fact, sorry, brief aside, but the truth is also something you can use versus an NDA. So if the NDA is being used to keep you from telling the truth is linked to criminal behavior, you can stand your ground. Don't do it without a lawyer, but you can stand your ground. All right, so Zenger's lawyer argued the truth is a defense against libel. How can you accuse me of libeling you, which is saying untrue things about you, if what I'm saying is true? Okay, the jury ultimately acquitted Zenger, the printer, and established an early precedent for freedom of the press to report on government misconduct. Aha! Freedom of the press begins, where we say, yeah, if I'm telling the truth, that's not a crime. This is important because this case is so important because we're going to come back to all the way to today's history, where we have people like Donald Trump who say telling the truth is a crime. So it's interesting that we can go all the way back to 1735 in our colonial days. We're not even a country yet, and admit and accept that telling the truth was a high value and it was worthy of protection. Truth telling was worthy of protection. So that is how the press began emerging as a role for the voice of the people and a check on government power. That goes all the way back, guys. I cannot believe how fundamental this was, that we said the truth is not libel. The truth is the truth, and it actually is super important. So then we come to Thomas Paine's Common Sense. This is in 1776. So this is right when we're founding ourselves. That's a weird sentence. I got to found myself. I often am finding myself, but rarely am I founding myself. Paine had a pamphlet called Common Sense, and you can still read it today. Lots of people have republished it. They just really loved it because Tom Paine, I guess, clarity was his thing. It played a pivotal role. Common Sense, the little booklet, the little pamphlet, called it a pamphlet, played a pivotal role in rallying the colonies to support independence from Britain. Published anonymously, even though he wrote it, it boldly criticized British rule and argued for a republican government accessible to all readers. Paine's work energized public opinion and swayed many previously undecided colonists toward revolution. It was an influential piece of political journal. Okay. Speak. It was an influential piece of political journalism. Frankly, that was a lot of L's. Common Sense showcases the press's power to inform and mobilize public sentiment and spark transformative political action. So now we're understanding, sorry, I get all excited about this, but now we're understanding Thomas Paine's captured the imagination of people through the power of the press. Get it? He's managed to figure out how to get his message out in a kind of broadcast form. It's early broadcast, but they're pamphlets, so it's getting out, it's getting disseminated. I like to think of it as one to many. He was able to manage the one to many, right? That's one of the early signs or early stages of journalism when you're able to get the message out to the masses. So there we go. We've got Thomas Paine. That's in 1776. American theme. I was going to do an American theme, but I can't think of one. So here we go. That's right. Stars and Stripes Forever. Not yet, though. I don't think it's written yet. All right. So now we get to a really critical time in 1951. I'm going to bring you all the way forward because now we need to look at the press and what's going on with the press helping us understand complicated stories. And we have the trial and execution of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. It started in 1951. They were executed in 1953. Here's the story. If you aren't familiar, this is a piece of history worthy of going back and reading about or watching a video or watching a movie. But the Rosenbergs were convicted of espionage, spying, for allegedly passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. While the case was complicated, much of the media coverage sensationalized the trial. That was true. It was juicy, I guess is the way we'd say it. Gossipy, lots of tea to be spilled. And for the first time, the press could really get there, not for the first time, but in a way that got national attention. And the first time in a mega way. This public fear of communism and supporting the government's hard stance was what the public wanted. There was this fear that we were being taken over. It's going to sound familiar. I feel like Rachel Maddow right now because she goes back and picks these stories. But when the Rosenbergs, mind you, okay, this is two spies sharing secrets. This is a bad thing. It's a very bad thing. It's kind of like, I don't know if your president were to ship COVID machines to Russia instead of saving them for his own people, like with the Americans. It's kind of something like that. But I don't know, people got really upset about it then. Some journalists and publications like the National Guardian raised doubts about the fairness of the trial and the strength of the evidence against the Rosenbergs. So we managed to leave the National Enquirer part to the side, and there were really some reporters who were trying to figure out what is really going on here, and does this trial have momentum that exceeds the legitimacy of the crimes? Meaning, are people just acting like rabid, hungry dogs? And it's had a lot to do with what was going on underneath. And we're going to talk about it in a minute, which is McCarthyism. At the same time, there was the Red Scare happening. So this evidence of a couple actually doing it was like, oh my God, proof of it. And we are all in danger. It's like everybody having to take off their shoes at TSA because of one person. That's basically what happened here. So we have the press now going in a little deeper and trying to figure out the fairness and the strength of the evidence, questioning whether anti-communist hysteria had influenced the verdict. The case became emblematic of Cold War anxieties and the Fourth Estate's complex role in reflecting and challenging popular sentiment and government action. So this is good because while the public was caught up in the hype, the media, the Fourth Estate was able to go in and really uncover what was going on, and a lot was hysteria. It's essentially the same as what's going on now with Trump, is how he whips people up into being hysterical and not listening to facts, right? What did I publish earlier? I published a podcast about fear makes you not think critically. The very nature of fear makes you give up critical thinking. That's how Trump does it. That's how McCarthy did it. We're going to talk about McCarthy in 1 second. So this illustrates the power of the media's ability to shape a historical narrative, but it came during the McCarthy years. And this is in 1954, Edward R. Murrow had enough. During the height of McCarthyism, and Edward R. Murrow is a reporter. He is a reporter's reporter. In the words of Tucker Carlson, he might be considered an alpha reporter. During the height of McCarthyism, that's when McCarthy was saying everybody was a communist and he was outing everyone and people were put on lists and Charlie Chaplin and all kinds of bad things. Like, it was bad. Fear of communism gripped the United States, and Senator Joe McCarthy led aggressive investigations, often accusing individuals of communist sympathies without sufficient evidence. Then they'd get put on a list and they'd get blacklisted. It was a horrible time. Many journalists, and we're almost there again, guys, we're almost there again. Many journalists were hesitant to challenge McCarthy for fear of being labeled unpatriotic. However, the man with the most street cred in the world, Edward R. Murrow, a respected broadcast journalist, took a courageous stand on his program, See It Now. Monroe's 1954 broadcast on McCarthy highlighted the center's intimidating tactics and disregard for due process, effectively exposing McCarthy's abuses to the power to the public. The program's impact significantly eroded McCarthy's support because back then, if a reporter told a story that showed a man was corrupt, people believed him. Imagine that. Sorry, it just makes me so mad. Marking a turning point where the fourth estate took a stand against government overreach and defended civil liberties. But wait, there's more, because this was almost the glory days of journalism, if you think about it. In 1971, just a little bit, sorry, I just dropped something. 1971, Daniel Ellsberg, a former US military analyst, leaked the Pentagon Papers. It was a classified government reporting detailing the United States' involvement with Vietnam, and the press played a crucial role in bringing this information to the public. So this was revealing corruption going on with the Vietnam War. And I was still a little kid, but I remember this was a big deal because my mom was losing it. My mom, and she was getting divorced at that time. So post-divorce, she always got mad with her friend Elaine. Before that, she would get mad with my dad about politics because they talked about politics a lot. But after the divorce, it was always with Elaine. Anyway, when this broke, the New York Times and Washington Post published the documents despite intense government efforts to suppress them. Oh, you can bet they were intense. The expose revealed that the U.S. administrations, not more than one, had misled the public. So there was actually a change in power, and we still had a problem of being misled about the scope and strategy of the war, leading to this is the Vietnam War, significant public distrust and a national debate over government transparency. This landmark case underscored the press's power to hold the government accountable and fueled the push for government secrecy and executive power reforms. So that's the Pentagon Papers. That's in 1971. Guess what? It's just going to keep getting worse because in 1972, Woodward and Bernstein start their investigative journalism in the Washington Post, exposing the Nixon administration's involvement in the Watergate scandal, a series of political crimes that included wiretapping and attempts to sabotage political opponents. Guys, it never gets old. It's always just on one side. That's the part. That's the part about being a do-gooder liberal, is that it just feels like sometimes we just get bashed and bashed and bashed. That's okay. We're optimistic. Anyway, the reporting unveiled a pattern of corruption. The Watergate reporting unveiled a pattern of corruption and abuse of power at the highest government levels. How high, you say? Oh, the presidency, I believe. The press's relentless pursuit of the truth ultimately led to President Richard Nixon's resignation, making Watergate a defining moment in the fourth state's role in maintaining democratic oversight and integrity in governance. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the high watermark. We have had other successes in media, but this one was huge. And one of the reasons it was huge, I believe, is because we still had broadcast and print media as effective means of communicating. So one of the things that's changed, and let's talk about it real quick, is that we have changed how the media comes to us. There are now choices, actually too many choices. So the evolution of media has really fractured its effectiveness. It began with print media, good old newspapers, the pamphlets that served as the primary sources of news, opinion, and public debate. And the thing is, early American newspapers that were often politically aligned, were really independent, reflecting the voices of local communities. The thing is, newspapers would come out roughly at the same time every day, and people would consume the same news. So it created, oddly, a real sense of community and purpose around the news because we all knew what we were talking about. There might be other things happening, but it was still possible at that time to have kind of a public, a town square, for lack of a better word, where we knew what was being talked about in the town square. The print era was delicious because it allowed for deeply researched reporting, fostering informed discourse, right? Because people are all talking about the same thing and they essentially have the same depth of knowledge as well. So you couldn't go crazy. You all kind of read the same thing. It was implied legitimacy, right? Because we're all reading the same thing. And it comes from, and the paper was something that was trusted and reliable. Like it built its brand on that kind of reliability. and errors and corrections would be printed because the brand was about trust. That was super important. Then came broadcast media. And broadcast, in this case, are the things that goes out over the airwaves, not cable. This is just the airwaves, and this is what the FCC controls in terms of broadcast licenses. In the broadcast, we still had a shared experience. It was really actually quite dramatic because now we have words and pictures, right? Now, I mean, more than we have pictures in the newspaper, but now we have like stories and we can hear inflections in voice because this is broadcast television. So how a reporter is feeling is also being conveyed. And it's funny to watch reporters try to have no feelings. That was a big thing, is to try to be neutral. Reporters, they didn't even give you their opinions on things, not like today. You did not know a reporter's opinion on things. They kept it to themselves. That was one of their badges of honor. So in broadcast comes radio and television bring news to the masses in real time. And this created a powerful collective awareness and even inspired social action, right? Because we all got to be excited about something or worried about something or concerned about something, and we would all move. And I can remember this because I was a kid and I was like doing the no nukes stuff, right? No nukes in Women's March. I was also pro ERA. That was welcome to me. All right. So we have that broadcast marked the beginning also of corporate ownership. Now this is I want to go dun, dun, dun. That's foreshadowing because this is going to be a bad thing. As news stations sought revenue through advertising, corporate influence began to shape the coverage choices. Over time, advertisers increasingly influenced the type of stories deemed worthy of airtime. Get it? Do you see how money's coming into this now and starting to add bias? Money always adds bias. Money is bias. That's what money is. It's pay attention to me. I get to I matter right now. That's what money is. It's just bias. So broadcast journalism started to focus more on sensationalism as stories were shortened and simplified to retain viewers. I want you to hear that word simplified. They started to dumb down the news. This is so important. This is another factor that started happening, is we had to dumb it down, weakening its power to inform people at a deep level. And then for the dummies, we got cable news. And I watch cable news, so I too am a dummy. Cable news arrived in the 1980s with CNN's 24-hour news cycle. That was actually pretty cool. You could go to any airport, you could go to any hotel, you would know what was going on around the world from the same thing. It was so nice. They had CNN International, CNN US. It was great. And I loved it. As a businesswoman who traveled all over the place, I loved in the 80s when CNN, I was just starting to travel. Let's see. Actually, I didn't quite travel to the 90s, but I still was, CNN News was the best. I mean, it just was so good. And you could hear, this is CNN. Anyway, it transformed journalism into a constant stream of information. Now, for those of you who don't remember old CNN, it ran like a ticker. I often compared the ticker to Twitter, because you can post the same thing on Twitter several times over days and different people will see it. That's how Twitter works. It's a moment in time. And if you miss it, you might see something that ages, but generally it's your moment. You got to hit it until you get asked to the back room, and the back room is basically usually Facebook or LinkedIn, something with higher engagement. But Twitter is like this. And that's what happened on cable news 24/7. The news started churning it out. And at first, cable would rerun. So they knew you would be dropping in when you could drop in. So it reran. It wasn't like streaming on demand at this time. It would just run on a loop with different reporters and with the stories getting updated. But essentially, you kind of knew what was going on. It was pretty cool in that regard. But you can see now, here what we've already done. We've already decided the news needs to be sensationalized. We've decided it needs to be shorter and dumbed down. And now it's going to be on 24/7. And CNN promises immediate updates and comprehensive coverage created to a culture of round-the-clock engagement. This is still before streaming and social media and the internet, guys. This is 1980. This is as sexy as it got in the 80s, because we still don't have these other tools that are going to change everything. We don't have mobile phones yet, nothing. So the promise of this immediate response was like, it was like, don't for it, right? This is the good stuff. Let's mainline it. I can get news as much as I want. If I'm a news junkie, I've got that kind of brain that likes to get on the hamster wheel. Love it. However, as the cable networks with distinct political leanings emerged, and that's what happened on cable, this immediacy led to sensationalism and polarized coverage because you got to fill 24/7. And now people are putting their butts in chairs and they're starting to watch the channel 24/7, which was not the intention, except it is. Because now, remember, the corporations are involved and they have big money invested in cable and they've got to figure out how to monetize cable. So here we go. The immediacy led to sensationalism and polarized coverage because that's what's going to draw your viewers and keep them sitting in their chairs for hours. And this is when they had to watch commercials. I just cannot emphasize this enough. Commercials were playing during this 24/7 crap. It wasn't like streaming where you can ignore that stuff. No. Commercials were playing too. Viewers gravitated toward networks that aligned with their beliefs, reinforced their perspectives, and reduced exposure to alternative viewpoints. They wanted the dopamine hit. So they went with people that would tell them what they wanted to hear. And the resulting segmented media landscape has contributed to a more polarized society where audiences tune in to reinforce rather than challenge their views. What's one of Jen Carroll's rules? Always ask questions, always challenge authority. All right. So then we have, which it finally gets ugly, is we have social media and streaming platforms and the video podcast services. And it makes news instantaneous, interactive, and highly personalized because people like me take it and put it into a way that people who follow me want to hear it. I mean, that's just like how it works, right? We all have different people we like to follow. They have a point of view, they have a style. That's how we end up following someone. So the biggest problem is that it created echo chambers and fostered disinformation. And unlike, I try to provide sources. There's links in this story. I try to go do my research. I take this seriously because you are listening. That's my responsibility to take this seriously, but I'm not getting paid either. So my motivation here is super altruistic. I'm doing this because I care about it, a little bit hedonistic. It also gives me a purpose right now while I'm job hunting. So, but that's the thing is when you add money to this stuff, everything gets screwed up. Echo chambers, foster disinformation. Unlike traditional journalism, social media platforms lack editorial oversight and enable the spread of unverified information and allowing algorithm-driven content to prioritize engagement over accuracy. Then you see a story like Elon Musk, who's been literally working with the Trump campaign to weaponize Twitter against liberal leanings. Like, it's insane how much power these American oligarchs have over some of these tools. Our media, our fourth estate, the people we're supposed to trust. All right. So, oh my God, I'm going to get into this. Well, dumbing it down for Americans, corporate America only tracks revenue. So yeah, I have a slide. If you're watching this on YouTube, I have a slide. And if you haven't ever looked at a slide like this before, it shows the media companies and how they align. Now, you have to watch it whose analysis you're looking at because everyone's analysis is different. Welcome to bias. But I chose one that I thought was pretty reasonable. It's missing some entities. I think it's not bad. What they do is they look across the bottom. They look at how well the content is created. So first, is it good content or bad content, quality or not quality? So it goes up. It goes from pure crap to it's okay to this. I consider this good quality. So it goes from red, yellow to green, just like you would expect. Red, stay away from it. Green, go ahead and consume it. And then it goes from super liberal to super conservative. And when I looked at this chart, I had to say, well, they're not that bad. They put CNN a little bit as a lean left. Maybe it hasn't been lately, but then this table is from September of 2023. And I couldn't find anything more recent that I really liked. That most of these tables are so complicated that they're too hard to look at. I liked the simplicity of this one because you could actually find most of the brands, media brands we would know, and be able to see where they land on this table. But this corporate consolidation has led to a commercialized profitability machine that changed this from being a public service to being a corporate entity that has to have profitability. They have shareholders. And if you haven't worked for a company that has shareholders, that makes the company have to dance to a different beat because you have to provide quarterly earnings reports that show how well you're doing and if you're meeting your targets. And every year, a business should have targets. We used to sit through strategic planning in the fall, like right about now, we'd be doing strategic planning and setting our business targets for the next year and what we'd need to do to get there and what our new product releases were going to be and acquisitions, partnerships, all that kind of stuff that you go through. That's the kind of planning that goes on when you're a corporation. When you're a newspaper, there probably should still be strategic planning because you want to keep the doors open in the old days. But nowadays, most of these media companies are part of huge conglomerates. So their little branch, they have a P&L for their media, but they roll up to a larger P&L, profit and loss statement in which they're just one entity. This has made everything a mess. And I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about when I say a mess. I'm going to give it to you right now without a picture. So there is a company called Sinclair Broadcasting. And they have started, one of the ways they're monetizing their news is they create packaged news stories and they go out and they're one of the largest owners of local television stations. So this is really important because these are the local stations, the ones that all of us out here in the sticks. Santa Cruz is the sticks, believe it or not, we're the sticks. Silicon Valley's over the hill. That's not the sticks, that's San Jose and Silicon Valley. But when you live in the sticks, Salinas, in California, up Crescent City, all these different places that are very far away from the main hubs, you have local broadcast stations, Fox News Salinas. So at this level, Sinclair buys up all these little independent stations. And then to control the content and their costs, they roll out content that has to be shown on all of their affiliates, whether or not it's market appropriate. And the problem is that Sinclair is conservative, very conservative. So a lot of the packages that they've delivered into areas like you could imagine California, where it just doesn't play, but they play them anyway because they're obligated because they're a Sinclair station. Anchors at Sinclair stations are often required to read scripts crafted by Sinclair's corporate office. That's not news. That's corporate messaging, regardless of whether the news reflect local concerns or journalist perspectives. See what I mean? They're just giving them words they put in their mouth. They turn these reporters into mouthpieces. The uniformity of the content masked as local news has undermined the perception of these outlets as independent, locally informed sources. That's the problem. The local stations want to do local news, and they're not given very much latitude to go do local news. The practice the corporate-driven approach leads to further public distrust as people increasingly see news as a tool for corporate or political agendas rather than as a platform for truth and accountability. So yes, the corporations have also screwed over the fourth estate. Remember I said the brand was their integrity and their brand was the biggest thing they had back in the day. That was so important. They were separate, they were independent, and they were righteous, man. They were just righteous. Reporters were righteous. I don't want to be one. Talk about justice. Justice goes with reporting so hard. Those two things are just so inextricably linked. And yet now a reporter's integrity and the brand isn't about trust and integrity. It's about monetization and the push for one size fits all narratives and no more diverse perspectives. It's all eroded, and the practice has diluted the integrity of the fourth estate, and it narrows the public's understanding of current events. So we have two god-awful things. Well, yeah, three things that happened that set up what's going to be in part two, because that's where we're heading right now. The three things that happened would be the corporate monetization of the media. That's bad, and that's on them. They did this to, well, the corporations. It's not on the journalists. It's on the corporation too. Compromised it. Number two is the bifurcation, or not bifurcation, it's the furcation, multiple furcation. I don't know what's the word for more than one buy. The multiple furcation of, or the total dismantling of news because we have so many sources for delivery. So we have too many channels. We have so many channels now, and that's the problem. There's just so many channels. So it's hard to know what's true because most of those channels have a bias, including me. I have a bias. So, and I'm not news, but I'm just saying I have a bias too. And then the last thing would be our elected officials are purposely undermining the media. And that is the worst. I mean, that is really disappointing because that is the one we could control. That is absolutely the one we could control. We may not be able to control multiple channels. We may not be able to control the corporations until we can get some protections in place to protect news reporting. But are leaders not supporting the news and calling everything fake and saying everything is a game is probably the hardest part of what's happening right now. And that's the thing we can change. All right. Come back tomorrow for part 2. I cannot wait to share it with you. Thank you for listening.